All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Overview of Prevention and De-Escalation for Teachers. This is specifically for Extended School Year, or ESY, and we are excited to be with you this morning. My name is Lauren Jones, and I'm part of the ESY Behavior Team.
And I'm Cheryl Harris. I'm also part of the ESY Behavior Team. And to echo Lauren, we are so happy that you're with us today and so excited that you allowed us to record this training so that we can share it with others.
Absolutely. Everything will be posted in the Google Classroom, the ESY 2024 Google Classroom at the conclusion of this training. So you will have access to the slides as well as access to this recording if you want to go back and rewatch any parts of it. So let's go ahead and
get started. All right, bright and early this morning. So our quick welcome ritual, you're going to need to turn your cameras on for this one.
No pressure.
Or you can use, what are those little things that pop up? You can use
the emojis.
Yes. If you're more of an emoji kind of person, that's cool too. So the first question is this anybody's first ESY experience? Oh, I see Kevin already engaging. Thank you, Kevin. Oh, he knows how to use them. He's letting me know.
Stephanie said nope.
Stephanie's like,
tried
nope,
and true.
Nope. Okay, Carrie's giving me
okay,
well, welcome. For those of you that are showing me a thumbs up or saying yes or no in the chat box, we appreciate it. We are so excited for anybody that's willing to train. Listen to me train. That's what we do, right? Willing to teach during the extended school year. We know that finishing up a year and starting a new mini year is not easy, but we do appreciate you. All right, what's our next question?
Our next question is...
Not my first. All right, Brian. Thanks for letting us know.
Give us a thumbs up if you are teaching elementary, and a thumbs down for secondary, not because secondary is thumbs down, just because that will give us a way to see who's teaching what.
See, lots of thumbs up, so we got lots of elementary. Okay, all right.
Any secondary peeps in the house?
Any secondaries today?
There's not a thumbs down emoji, I
don't think so. Well, that's kind of not nice.
Oh, there is a thumbs down emoji.
Oh, okay. All right.
We love secondary just as much.
Absolutely.
I was just trying to get some answers from the crowd.
Oh, okay. Brian says he teaches secondary during the year. Well, that's a nice switch, Brian. Thanks for letting us know that. That's always really nice. All right. Well, last question.
Okay.
And we hope everybody gives us a thumbs up in some way, shape, or form. All right. Let's see. Have you ever taken any other trainings with the ESY Behavior Team before? Let's see. Lots of thumbs up, I hope. Lots of thumbs up. If this is your very first training with us, it's okay to give us a thumbs down. We're just curious. Oh, I see lots of yeses. Thank you. Oh, man. I'm glad this is being recorded for posterity. I love it. All right. Well, we are so glad that you're rejoining us. Some of this, as you know, when you take trainings with us, we are very much of the belief that behavior is very important, hence the ESY Behavior Team, right? So you might get some review.
You did leave your number, and we ended up giving everybody a prize on their way out, but I didn't have any more of the tickets.
So you're going to see some things that might be a review for you. You're going to see some things that hopefully will be new to you. But nonetheless, we are so glad that you're here and we're ready to get started. Hopefully this got you warmed up. Like I said, we know that getting it started with a little welcome ritual always gets everybody kind of in that mood to learn.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to get started with some behavior basics. And those of you that are our tried and true behavior team fans, if you will, may have seen some of these slides before. You see some of these slides in a lot of our training because they're very important, and we really need to get that behavior basics understanding before we can dive in and talk about some of the deeper stuff. So we are going to do just a little overview on the basics of behavior before we jump into some strategies to put in your toolbox for prevention and de-escalation when working with your students. So first and foremost, we want to talk about the relationship between behavior and environment. And those two things can't exist without the other, right? Your behavior is impacted by the environment and vice versa. So behavior is everything we do. It is observable and measurable. That means it can be seen and it can be counted, right? It is not what someone is feeling, but it is how he or she expresses it. So sometimes we'll go into the classroom and say, hey, what's going on with your kiddo? And they'll say, he's rude. Okay, well, what does rude look like? Maybe he is cursing. Maybe he is putting his head down, right? Someone will say, we'll walk into a classroom and they'll say, she's sad. Okay, what does sad look like? Is she crying? Is she telling you that she's sad, right? So behavior, when we talk in behavioral terms, we want to make sure that it's observable and measurable. Then on the other side, we have environment. And environment is everything around us that can and may affect behavior. So the environment can affect our behavior. One example that we love to use, easy to understand, if it's cold in a room, you're going to put on a jacket. So the temperature in the room is affecting your behavior of going to find your jacket and putting it on, right? One of many examples that are out there, but the environment absolutely affects our behavior. So we think about the people that are in the environment that can impact our students' behavior, the places that they are, your proximity to them, and that can be how close or how far away you are from them. Their sensory needs and experiences as well, because we know some of our students can have sensory experiences. Think about the cafeteria, right?
Yes.
That's overstimulating.
That's so overwhelming
for all of
sometimes.
us as adults. So think about even more so for a student who might have noise sensitivity or light sensitivity or things like that. So we can change the change the environment
That's okay.
to shape behavior.
That's right.
So that's what we want to talk a little bit about today. And what are some minor changes that you can make in your classroom environment, in the way that you approach students to make some positive changes in behavior?
I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So why do you all think that people engage in problem behaviors? If anybody was in our trainings yesterday, you should know this one, right? So look at the little picture at the bottom. It says, if you bite him, he will give you the iPad to calm down. Anybody know why we engage in problem behaviors? Anybody?
They're all typing.
I think I agree. I think you're all feverishly typing. Makes me so excited. Let's see what comes up on the chat box. Let's see. Oh, nothing. Anything? Did you get anything?
Okay.
Brian. Here we go.
Attention.
Attention and a sense of belonging. Yes, at times, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for those responses. Well, you're actually right. Attention is a big one. It's one of the main 4 functions. But really, we engage in problem behaviors because in some way, shape, or form, they work for us, right? These behaviors work for us. So what are we saying? We're saying, more technically speaking, of course, that all behavior has a purpose or a function. All right, and here they are. If you've not seen them, we absolutely remember them. Oh yes, they can be satisfying sensory needs. Thank you for that, Stephanie. So it's worked in the past.
Absolutely.
All right, I love this. This is great. I love this back and forth. Thank you for that. So functions of behavior, the way that we used to train it was seat, but we had changed it to eats because everybody eats, right? So this is a great way to remember that there are some main functions of behavior. The first one is E for escape. That just means that we are doing the behavior because it removes some kind of activity or it removes an interaction or a person from our space. It's how we get out of things, right? Then we have attention, which several of you already jumped in on. And remember, when we're talking about attention, it provides access to people or interactions. This can include positive or negative interactions or positive or negative attention, depending on how you want to view that. Then we have the T for tangible. This is when we can access that preferred item or activity. It's how we get things. And unfortunately, sometimes kids, young people, even some of us as adults, utilize not so good behaviors to get something specific that we want. And the last one, and the reason it's the last one, we know many students are impacted by sensory needs and they have behaviors that have to do with sensory. However, we are training and we want to make sure everybody understands that we are wanting you to go through the whole process and really try to consider and tease out the escape functions, the attention functions, the tangibles, prior to saying, oh, he's doing it because it's all sensory. Because what we have found and what we know based on the science of applied behavior analysis, based on observation, based on all the things that we do, and I'm sure you all would agree as well as educators, is that sometimes problem behavior actually most often it's serving multiple functions, right?
Absolutely.
So a lot of people were getting away easy and just saying, oh, it was all sensory. So we want you to consider all four always and leave sensory to the last so that you're really looking for those patterns as you're researching and exploring the behavior.
For sure. And so why is this important? You guys are here for ESY training. You're going to spend 7-8 weeks with these students. So why do you need to know the functions of behavior? Because if you have an understanding of the why behind your students engaging in behaviors, you can help to give them more positive ways to meet those needs.
Absolutely.
So how do we learn behaviors? We learn behaviors through the principle of reinforcement. Behavior that is reinforced will happen again. So I love that Kevin said in the chat box, it's worked for them before, right? That's how we learn a behavior. We engage in a behavior, and when it works for us, meaning we get the desired result, we're going to continue to do it in the future. So it says even behaviors that you think you learn naturally, we actually learn based on the principle of reinforcement. So this starts as young as an infant. An infant cries, what happens? Somebody comes, somebody picks them up, maybe tries to change them, maybe feeds them, maybe holds them, right? Spends time with them. That infant learns when I cry, somebody is going to come and help me meet my needs. This is the first way that they learn how to get their needs met. Now, as they grow into toddlers, into young children, they learn other skills to get those needs met. Maybe they ask for it. Maybe they take their parent's hand and show them, right? So they're learning other ways. But initially, it's the crying because that's what works for them.
Absolutely.
So kids in school, they raise their hand. They get called on. They get potentially praised, right? Thank you so much for raising your hand. They will continue to raise their hand in class if that response was desirable, meaning they get what they were looking for out of raising their hand. So if they get called on. Now, if I'm a kid in class and I'm raising my hand, and nobody's ever calling on me, do you think the student's going to continue raising their hand?
No, they're not, Lauren.
They're not, right? Because it's not working. So that may be when it turns into, hey, teacher, because nobody's answering them, right?
Miss.
Then we think about our adolescents. What do our adolescents want? They want peer attention, right? That, I think, is the number one function for our adolescents. So they're going to mimic what their peers are doing. They're going to dress like their friends. They might listen to the same music as their friends, right? Then they're accepted into whatever social group they're trying to become a part of. Then they are continue to mimic what their peers do as they are accepted into that social group. Now, adults, we as adults, even us, all of you here in today's training, respond to reinforcement.
Yes.
You go to work. You are here today. You are on this video call spending time with us, partially because we know we're so much fun.
Awesome.
And you love hanging out with the behavior team.
Absolutely.
But also because you're getting paid, right? You get paid. It keeps you coming to work. If you got an email tomorrow that said, oh, hey, sorry, we're having a shortage. We're not going to pay you for summer school. I don't know that you would come back, right? Yes, there is a link it is a QR code for attendance, and we will put that up. My apologies that we skipped that in the beginning, but I'll make sure you get it before we're done. So we all respond to reinforcement.
Absolutely.
So we can reinforce behaviors without meaning to, right? As adults, we're trying to do good things. We're trying to teach in our classroom. Think about the adult that's walking by in the hallway. We've all had it happen to us, or been the adult. You see a kid in crisis or a kid upset in the hallway, and you're, hey, bud, what's going on? And the teacher's like, no, stop, right? So you're well-meaning, you're trying to help, but you may actually be reinforcing that behavior without meaning to. So we as adults need to think about, what am I doing?
Yes, Kevin. Yes.
That is your reinforcement. Your reinforcement is your money. You need that QR code.
We promise we'll take a moment and put it back up. It's always good to not do it right at the beginning. So we were just trying to follow best practice, but we promise to put it up in just a few minutes.
Absolutely. We promise you will get your reinforcement for your attendance and your engagement in our presentation today. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Oh, that was great. So here it is. We need to understand something, and some of you might already understand this, and that's great if it's a review for you, but basically behaviors occur in phases, right? We sometimes call it the crisis cycle. It depends on who's trained you in the past, but basically, if you are currently trained in professional crisis management, this will look very familiar to you. But basically, down at the bottom left, you will see where it says common stable functioning. This is when the students are responding to us. We ask them to do something, they do it, maybe with few redirections, that kind of thing. But what's really important to understand is this is where we want to teach. When kids are calm and stable, that's when we want to teach them. That's when we want to teach social skills. That's when we want to teach math. That's when we want to teach reading.
All the
things, okay? Communication, following directions, right? And think about it. This is when you are ready to learn as well as adults, right? When we're not in calm or stable functioning, we're really not focused on what is happening in front of us. So calm and stable functioning sometimes is associated with being in the green zone. I do have to preface this by saying there is no zone that is good, there is no zone that is bad.
Yes.
But many of you are going to be teaching students that have been trained in the zones of regulation. And if they were to tell you that they're in a zone, this is a wonderful resource for you to have. We sometimes do associate it though with a specific phase in the crisis cycle. So we're just trying to give you, I'll say, some nuggets of understanding very, very quickly here, and that's why they're paired for this specific slide. So if I'm in the green zone, I'm happy, I'm pretty calm, I'm ready to learn, right? So I'm in calm and stable functioning. Now you do have to understand that everybody presents differently in calm and stable functioning. I'm sure you have one or two friends that are just more excited to be somewhere. You have one or two friends. Oh, that's a great question, Stephanie. They do make zones posters. They do. They also have some within the manual that I think you can print and blow up. I think they're not licensed in the same way.
Yes, so if you go on the Blender where the social skills and behavior support resources are, there is access to the zones posters. It's what used to come on the CD, but there's no more CDs. So now it's within the Blender, but you can print in color and laminate them and put them around your classroom. I'm just gonna say personally, if you Google, there's some other fun ones out there. So Cheryl actually has a Star Wars one hanging in her office that relates with different Star Wars characters. There's ones from Inside Out that I love that I put up there. So like I had in my classroom that, anger and joy and those people, because sometimes the characters help the kids associate. So the official zones posters, yes, are on Blender that you can print and laminate and hang up in your room. But do a little research because zones is not just used in Palm Beach County. It's actually a very well-known social emotional regulation curriculum. And there's lots of teachers out there who have done other things with it, and you can get creative.
And Stephanie, we had made a large purchase. If I can get my hands on any, I'll pony one to you, okay? Some of those ones that are already ready for hang up. So I'll see what I can do. Okay, no worries. I'll write that down before I go. So
make it a note for you.
Thank you. So you're very welcome, Stephanie. So common stable functioning, this is when we teach, right? But we move up a little bit where you see the yellow zone, where you see the word pre-crisis. There's many kids that are coming to us and they kind of live in this pre-crisis. So what is pre-crisis, you ask? Pre-crisis is when you have an unresolved problem. This can be something that occurred at home. This could be something that occurred on the bus. It could have occurred in the hallway. It could have occurred with you as their teacher just a few seconds ago. But pre-crisis means there's an unresolved problem that needs to be resolved. Sometimes it's associated with being in the yellow zone, but the yellow zone is also when you're really, really, really excited. Like somebody says, hey, Cheryl, on Friday afternoon, you get to go to Disney World for the next 2 weeks. Woo! Yes, I'm going to be super excited.
Oh, Brian's coming.
Brian,
there we go.
Brian, you and I am a big Disney girl, right? So that would make me very excited. And I may say that I am in the yellow zone. But what are we supposed to do when the kids are in pre-crisis? So this is when we remind and we prompt, right? So let me connect you back as to why. If we are teaching during calm and stable functioning, that means that we understand what the kids need. And if they are having some kind of unresolved problem, they are in pre-crisis, for example, at that point, we can remind and prompt the skills that we have already taught. As we move up the continuum or up into the phases, the next one you see is at the tippy top, and it's crisis. Here, the whole goal is safety, okay? When a student is in crisis, their bodies are not in control, their brains are not in control, they are in crisis. So we focus our world on safety. It doesn't mean that being in the red zone is a bad thing. If a kid tells you, I'm getting to the red zone, you just need to know that they're almost to that point, right? So this is about vocabulary and also instructing you all in that, but also connecting this to how things can work in a ESY classroom or in any classroom actually. Then after crisis, we are in what we consider the most delicate part of the continuum, which is post-crisis. If I'm in post-crisis, I can move the kid back up into crisis, or I can close the loop back to common stable functioning. As a teacher, I always want you to close the loop back to common stable functioning, okay? So we have to know that sometimes when the kids say that they're sad or they're very, very tired, sometimes they may use the word bored because they don't have another word for it. The reality is they could be in that post-crisis, or they could be, that could be how they function as well.
Sure.
So this is just a little bit of an overview on the behavior phases or the crisis continuum, depending on how you were trained. But please understand that we've connected the zones of regulation so that you have it as a resource. Many of the students that you will be teaching during ESY have zones of regulation that's instructed directly throughout the year. So if they use the language, we wanted you to be immersed in that language.
Absolutely. So keep those colors in mind, because as we go to the next slide, we talk about the strategies that you can use in each of those phases. So the strategies that you have available, or let's say the tools in your toolbox, are going to change based on where your student is on that continuum that Cheryl just reviewed. So it is important for you as staff to be able to identify where your student is on the crisis continuum, so you know what skills you're focusing on, so you know what redirection to provide them, right? So in stable functioning, that green zone, we're working on prevention, and Cheryl talked about that's when we're teaching, right? So this is when we're doing all that good prevention stuff that we're getting ready to jump into. Then in pre-crisis, we're using de-escalation strategies that we've already taught. Important to note that these things have already been taught, right? We're not trying to teach a new skill when our students are already in pre-crisis. This should be reminders and prompting. Then crisis, we talked about there, that focuses on safety, and really we're just stopping the crisis behavior at that point, whatever that looks like for you, right? Whether it's calling the crisis response team on your campus, maybe you are part of that crisis response team, and then you would know a little bit more about how to stop that behavior in the moment. Then in post-crisis, we're working on the reintegration back into regular classroom activities. And the speed at which you do this is going to depend on the student. It's going to depend on the teacher who needs to be ready to receive them back into the classroom, right? But we always talk about slow reintegration back into the classroom. Now, that doesn't mean that the student should be sitting in the BIA's office for 2 hours.
Or the rest of the day.
Or the rest of the day. But we do want to take it slow. So after a crisis, give them a little time to cool down, take a deep breath, maybe drink some water, and then slowly bring them back in with some easy tasks that we understand. The most important thing we want you guys to hear is that if we're teaching in that stable functioning time, it builds our toolbox of strategies to use later when our students start to escalate into that pre-crisis. So here's the stages of pre-crisis, and we want you to notice that even in pre-crisis, in that yellow range, there is a large, vast range of behaviors, right? So in the early stages, it might just look like I'm a little off task, I'm a little disengaged. If you don't know your students well at the beginning of ESY, you may be meeting new students. This may be hard to spot for some of your kiddos in the beginning, right? So I may not know that Cheryl tapping her foot under her desk is a sign that she is in early stages of pre-crisis. Now, as I get to know Cheryl and I spend time working with her, when I start to see that foot tap, I'm gonna say, okay, time to use some of my de-escalation skills, right? Absolutely. But in those early stages, you might miss it if you don't know what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Now, in the middle stages, they're becoming a little bit more visibly upset or agitated, and that's when we start to see what we call junk behavior. So junk behavior is something that's it's not necessarily harmful, but it's annoying, it's the cursing, it's the calling out. It's
sometimes people call it disrespect.
Yeah.
Too. Like you're using profanity. That's disrespectful, but
right.
We would define it as using profanity.
Right. So we say junk behavior because it is still a problem, right? We're not saying it's not an issue, but we're saying it's not harmful. It's not necessarily crisis at this point.
It's not going to hurt somebody physically. It's going to maybe just annoy them or bother them.
Absolutely. So then in those later stages, the intensity of those problem behaviors may be increasing, or the student is engaging in more frequent behavior, and they're engaging in behavior that could eventually lead into a crisis. So you see that vast range, and the strategies that you're going to use in those early stages may be a little bit different than the strategies you use in those later stages.
But I think what's really important about this slide too, and I love the way that you explain this, Lauren, but one of my big takeaways, and I want to make sure everybody understands, is the earlier you intervene, the better it is, right? Because if you look, even the slope of the line, for lack of a better word, right? It's just becoming more and more and more intense. So you want to make sure that if you're starting to notice that there is pre-crisis occurring in that student, that you intervene as early as you can.
Absolutely, for sure. And it says more strategies on these later. We are going to talk a little bit more about strategies on those, but first we want to hop into prevention.
Perfect, let's do it. So, importance of prevention. Basically, guys, this is the way it is. When we focus on prevention, it keeps things away from the problem behavior, meaning we can help it stay where it is. We don't have to see it escalate. So we need to know that there's two types of mindsets going into a training such as this, or a content such as this. A preventionist mindset needs to consider, what can they already do right? And what do they need to learn? And you have today and tomorrow to really, really, truly explore the IEP, to explore the behavior plan, all of that.
Absolutely.
Okay? We want you to really be in that preventionist mindset for the next 2 days. However, we also understand and we respect and we know, because many times that's what the mindset that we're in, is an interventionist mindset needs to consider, how can I stop this behavior quickly? So when they are at the top of the phases that we talked about, or the crisis continuum that we talked about, you must think like an interventionist. However, the rest of the time, we want you to have that preventionist mindset. Prevention works. It really, really does.
Right.
Do you want to stop real quick and show them the one slide?
We can pull up that
this
QR code.
This is a perfect time for the QR code. Perfect time. We have 16 people. I better not see it drop after the QR code.
All right, so here's your QR code. What we found yesterday in the in-person training is that people are having difficulty locating which one to sign in. So when you the first option it gives you, choose ESE. Even if you're teaching elementary, choose ESE first, and then you can choose elementary in the second portion. You could scan the QR code with your phone, or you can also use that website right down there, but we're taking a pause for just a minute to give you guys a second to get attendance. Google Meet also is recording your attendance, and we will have an email copy of what time you logged in and what time you logged out. So that will be provided to your site administrators as well, so that we can prove that you stayed with us for the whole time, but it is important. So this is
for today, I think.
That's a great question. This is our first session for today, but I'm gonna see, so it does give you the option to choose today's date. Yeah, let's go ahead and call this session 1. I think that's fair.
Sure. I don't know what it says. So.
Yeah, it goes, well, this talks about June 4th, but it's all in the same one. So can you please share the link here? I don't know if it'll let me copy paste it or not. Nope, it's changing the slide.
Oh, but it does ask you for what session you are attending. It says mark June 4th. Oh, wait, but we're June 5th.
I know. But on the first one, you chose June 4th or June 5th. Okay. I'd say let's go ahead and go with session 1.
Yeah, and make sure you fill in prevention and de-escalation. And if you want to be really specific, put prevention, de-escalation, virtual.
And like I said, guys, don't worry. We are taking virtual attendance as well. Can you please show, I checked June 5th, but on the next page it said what June 4th session. Yeah, we understand that.
That could be a typo. That's okay.
These sessions were provided live yesterday as well, so that's why you're seeing both. And they had the sign in all-in-one attendance. But as long as you complete it, like I said, Google Meet will send us an email at the end of this telling us what time everybody logged in and logged out, and we will pass that forward if asked for it, so that site administrators have the documentation that you guys have been here.
So don't stress it. We will help you where we can.
All right, the link's in the chat box. I'm going to give you guys just another minute to do that, and then we're going to hop back into
The presentation.
prevention. Let's see. Everybody all set?
Everybody good? You can unmute or give us a emoji or something to let us know you're good. Like anything.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
A party. I love
Oh, I
all of
love
those
the
things.
hearts.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. All right.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys. We just want to make sure we're not going too fast or too slow or perfect. All right. So the golden rule of prevention, thank you, Carrie. The golden rule of prevention is to maximize relationships. And oftentimes we hear a lot about this as educators, the importance of that professional student-teacher relationship. However, we want to make sure that you really understand it because ESY is like a mini school year, okay? And you've got to make sure that you get this concept. So it's the number one key to preventing and de-escalating behaviors. Let me say that again. I want that to wash over you. Having and building a relationship, it's the number one way of preventing and de-escalating problem behaviors, okay? And this works not just with students. This also works with our private and professional relationships.
Absolutely.
Our personal relationships. It's amazing. So real quick, you don't have to answer, but just reflect. Think about it. Who do you want to learn from? Right? If we would have started this morning and we would have been like, hi, nice to be here.
Here we go.
Y'all would have been like, oh my God, I don't think I can sit through this, right? So who do you want to learn from? Think about it. The kids are asking themselves that question as well. When you're upset, who do you go to, right? You may have some people that you go to, someone not dry. Yes, right.
Yes.
Absolutely. When you're upset, who do you want to connect with, right? Usually it's somebody who's warm but non-judgmental, somebody who's going to hear your side of the story, right? And then who are you going to accept help from? Are you going to accept help from somebody who's already told you 100 times that you're terrible, horrible, and no good? Probably not. You're going to go to somebody who's going to be like, oh, I'll be happy to help you with that.
Yeah.
That's my joy to help you, right? So think about that because that's exactly what the kids are feeling from us when we're trying to establish those relationships and maximizing those relationships so that the prevention aspects can be in place and hopefully we can de-escalate them if needed. And this is a hard one to stomach sometimes, but you really need to hear this. Many of our students simply just want to know that we like them. I know some kids are more likable than others. I get that. But the ones that are tougher are the ones we have to work the hardest with, okay? So real quick, let's see if maybe you want to take two in the chat box,
Let's
maybe, or one of you can unmute, one of you can tap in chat in the chat box. How do you build relationships with your students? Give me one example, anybody. Give me one thing.
That's it. Knowing your students.
Yeah, getting to know them, absolutely.
Knowing what they like, absolutely, John, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, somebody in the chat box, tell us, what do you do to build relationships with your students?
Or you can unmute.
Asking them their likes, absolutely.
Okay.
Good. And you know what else works? Actually just doing some warm things like saying good morning.
Yeah, for sure.
Goodbye. Things like that. I know it sounds very simple. Oh, Kevin's got a whole thing.
Yes.
Very video game
Love
t-shirts.
that.
Yeah. Developing that rapport. Absolutely. Brian says, letting them know that you're there for them and building a relationship over time to show them that you care. Asking them about their favorite activities. Yes, Paola. Lisa says, knowing.
Oh, I love that. Knowing what
puts
puts a smile on their face and getting to know their lives.
Okay, who was that? Because I want you to know. So
Lisette.
Lisette, we call that glimmers, right? So a lot of people focus on triggers. Oh, you don't want to trigger them. You want to, but we love to focus on glimmers. When is it that they glimmer? When is it that they shine and they get excited about things? And that seems to be what you put into the chat box. So thank you for that. The same way we want to get to know what may trigger a behavior, we also want to know what a child glimmers with, meaning when are they most happy? When are they in that peaceful, happy space?
Yeah.
Where they can actually learn and hopefully be in that state stable functioning. Look
Love
at
it.
that.
And we got
You
one
guys are
more
great.
response
one
that
more.
said making them feel like they're totally accepted and you understand them. I love that. So important.
Yes, we want people to be themselves, right? Oh,
Choreograph a multi-step
Yes.
handshake dap up. Love that.
Okay, Kevin, I wanna learn a handshake multi-steps.
Making them feel accepted.
Absolutely. All right, you guys did great with that activity. Thank you. So make sure you bring some of that to your ESY classroom on Monday.
Absolutely. All right. So some general prevention strategies. Remember, we're establishing this during calm and stable functioning. Cheryl said it before. I'm going to say it again. We're teaching. What do I teach? I'm teaching functional skills. I'm teaching communication skills, how to ask for help, how to say when I'm upset, right? When I'm teaching social skills, taking turns, asking for help, sharing, things like that. Also teaching academic skills. That's why we're here, guys, right? We're working on those IEP goals.
IEPs. IEPs.
And also replacement behaviors, right? We talked about a little bit earlier. If we know that their behavior is serving a specific function, we can teach them a new behavior that meets that same function. This is when we're teaching those things. We're also modeling expectations. We're providing feedback. So they're trying new skills. This may be something that they've never been exposed to before. We've got to give them feedback and coaching and walk them through it and tell them how they're doing. We're giving them specific praise for those specific behaviors. So we want to say exactly what we love that they're doing. I love the way you walked into the classroom and opened up your book and got straight to work. I love the way you asked me for help instead of using your hands with your friends, right? And then we're providing structure, choices, and consistency. And guys, all of these things are so important for our students. We as adults thrive on structure and consistency and being able to have choices. I love the example Cheryl always gives. If I took you to a restaurant that had one thing on the menu, would you be likely to go to that restaurant? No, because we as adults like having choices. And our students do too. And a lot of times our younger students or our students who may be more impacted don't get the opportunity to make those choices. So whenever we as the educators can give them that opportunity, it can be a small choice, but any choice is something that can be big for our students.
So we could actually spend the rest of the day training on this topic, but we want you to understand there's some buzzwords that we hear often, and for ESY purposes, it's even more important because we may not get to know our students as well as we would during the school year. But you have to understand that we really want you to have a little bit of a mind shift in working with kids. So we have to understand what is trauma. So trauma is a real or perceived event or threat or series of events or threats which are so emotionally painful that the individual's ability to cope may be severely compromised or overwhelmed. We have to understand, we have to recognize that exposure to trauma is prevalent in our students today. So I defined it for you, but I need to make sure that you all embrace the fact that many of our youth today that are coming into our schools are impacted by even one event or maybe a series of events or one threat or a series of threats. Things like domestic violence, things like food instability, things like a parent being in jail or they might be grieving for a family member that's passed away. We have to understand that that is happening. Many of our youth and our students that we serve on a daily basis have trauma that they bring into the classroom. So we need you to have a little bit of a mind shift. And I encourage you and I challenge you to practice this, not just with our students, right, Lauren, but in our everyday lives, right? We need to start focusing on what may have happened to them rather than what's wrong with them. So let's have this conversation. Have you ever been walking through the school campus and somebody always says hi to you and that one day they did not say hi to you? And you kind of like get a little attitude about it. You might be like, well, what's wrong with her? Why wouldn't she say hi to me today? What's wrong with her?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is the blue side. That's where many of us are when somebody kind of, I want to say rubs us the wrong way, or maybe they do an unexpected behavior.
Absolutely.
We're like, what's wrong with them? No, they didn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or like a kid that might tip over a chair in our classroom, or a student that may try to run out of the room. What's wrong with him that he's trying to run out of the room?
Sure.
So a lot of people live on the blue side. We need you to start shifting your mindset to the more green teal, I guess that's a teal,
Yeah.
teal side, right? Where we want you to start thinking about what may have happened or what happened to this young person or what happened to this person maybe on the way to work that they couldn't take a moment today to say good morning to me. Because you know what this does is it helps us to have a better response to the situation. When we think, what's wrong with them that they didn't say hi to me, we may not say hi to them for the rest of the week,
Right.
right? We might get stuck. But if we think what may have happened to them on the way to work that didn't allow them to connect with us that morning, we may actually go by their classroom later and say, hey, I was just wanting to check in on you, see how you're doing.
For sure.
Right? This is the mind shift. Now, it looks really easy on the slide, right? We're talking about it for T-minus 2 minutes. But the reality is this needs to become a practice. This needs to become part of how you respond on an everyday basis. There's a lot of this training out there. Please feel free to attend and immerse yourself in this work. It really is exciting work, and it really helps us to understand behavior better.
Absolutely. And it's so important. I love that Cheryl said not just kids, but adults too.
Absolutely.
A good place to practice this is in traffic.
Traffic!
Cheryl has taught me this. When someone cuts you off, you never know where they have to be, right? And I think for ESY, because we have such a short amount of time with our students, we may not know the answer to the question, right? Some of your students that you have all school year long, you build a relationship, maybe you get to know those caregivers and you get a little bit of insight into, why they might be experiencing those things or what things have happened. In this short amount of time, you might not know the answer to what has happened, and that's okay. But coming at it from that mindset, whether something has happened or not, I think is the best way to approach any student and any adult that you're interacting with.
I agree. And it really is a prevention strategy, which is why it's in this section.
For sure. So some environmental supports, these are just really things for you to consider. We talked about a little bit when we first jumped into this about how the environment impacts behavior. So it impacts the way that all of us work and learn. And our job as teachers, as educators, is to create a place where our students feel safe and comfortable. So sometimes just a small change can make a big impact. Now, there are some parts of the environment that unfortunately we don't have control over. Things like the air in most locations, right? I know a few classrooms here and there have a little bit more control, but for the most part, we don't have control over that. But even reminding students to bring a sweater if we know it's going to be cold, right? But the things there that we can have a little bit of control over, think about the noise level in the classroom and how we can change that. Some teachers like to play a little bit of calm music in the background. For some students, that could be overwhelming. For some students, that could be relaxing. So again, knowing your students, knowing what they respond to, the lighting, their seating location. Do they need to be closer to the front? Do they need to be in the back so they have a little bit more space to move around? Their workspace, also the classroom setup, and the student's proximity to other staff or other students, knowing where your students need to be, and the door. It's talked about there. We have to say it every single time. I would say 90% of the time when we get called out as the behavior team to help the student keeps running out of the classroom. They are sitting here by the door.
Please don't do that.
So if you find that you have a student that is running out of the classroom, our recommendation number one, there are some other things. We can teach some skills. We can practice responding to a stop sign, things like that. But number one recommendation, move them a little bit farther away from the door, okay? So environmental supports, just think about those things to make it really better for you as a classroom teacher as you're setting this up.
So some supplemental supports, these are things like visuals, timers, reinforcement systems, controlled choices. That just basically means 2 choices that you want them to do, right? One of which are okay with, right? They're commonly used prevention strategies. And the reason is they help to provide predictability, structure, consistent messaging, right? If you're using a timer for everything, then everybody really kind of starts to understand that that is part of the classroom routine.
For sure.
Please understand that you can't just throw out things. You have to explicitly teach them, which is the 3rd action point, right? Because we want to make sure that when we teach and we practice and we reinforce these supplemental type supports, it's going to help them be more independent, which ultimately lightens our load as a teacher. So really, really important, because what it does, if you look at that very last action point, is it reduces the need for us to be constantly talking. Right? If the kids can set their own timers, how amazing is that? Then you can be all about the praise statements. I really like the way that team Purple went ahead and set their timer and moved right into I'm ready. I really,
Yes,
really like the way
Absolutely.
that team blue went ahead and got their timer set up. Then you're not like timer, 5 minutes, timer, 5 minutes, you know? So we become more of a positive presence, more of that facilitator presence, which is very much a prevention strategy.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about some of those supplemental supports, and we are going to go through these quickly just
Yes.
because we want to respect your time, and we know we're getting close to the end, but we do want to review these, and again, all of these slides and recording will be posted for you. So visual supports, we rely on visuals throughout the day. We as adults need visual supports. A lot of times I think we hear visuals and we think about, just the board maker pictures that can be more elementary, like that lineup rules that you see there, but all things are visuals. We know which street to turn on because there are visual supports.
Absolutely.
We know that we are in this Google Meet because it's on my Google Calendar, right? I knew that I needed to be logged on at 9 o'clock this morning. So visuals help us become more independent, and they also help our students become more independent. The most important thing when using any kind of visuals, like those timers, rules, anything like that, is to make sure you're teaching it explicitly. A lot of times we hear teachers say, well, I posted the rules, but nobody's following them. You also have to explicitly teach them. So anytime you're using a visual, make sure it's being taught explicitly.
So some quick reinforcement system. Remember, a well-developed and used reinforcement system that sends that consistent messaging that this is what you get when you demonstrate an expected behavior. Some students will need a lot more than just natural reinforcement, like a smile that you give or a thumbs up that you give. That's all great, but they are going to need more than that to strengthen the behaviors you want to see. So quickly, we're going to show you some group and some individual systems.
All right, so group systems ensures that reinforcement is equitable. So we always get the question, well, Cheryl's on a behavior chart and she gets to earn 3 times a day. What about my other kids? So this allows all students in your classroom to have access to group reinforcement systems. The visuals you see here are just 2 examples. We love that chart down at the bottom. We've used it in summers past. It is posted in the Google Classroom for you to have access to, but your kids can work as a group to get to the end of the game board. And when they get to the end of the game board, they get 10 extra minutes of recess or a donut party or whatever it is that you and your students work together to determine. The most important thing about a group system is that we're selecting 1 to 2 specific behaviors and that your students know exactly what they need to do in order to get it. The nice thing about this is that it can change. So maybe in the beginning of ESY, I'm working on staying in your assigned area. When we complete that game board, I'm going to say, okay, guys, we're going to switch it up. Now we want to work on raising your hand before you ask a question, right? So we're going to be explicit about what it is that we need from them, and that's how they're going to work through the game board. If you're teaching those upper grade levels, using something like spelling out a word and they can earn letters to a word, the most important thing is that they're working together as a team. This is one example of a group system.
So cute.
It's a virtual marble jar. You can use a real life marble jar too, but the students can work together to put marbles in the jar, and once the jar is full, they get a reward.
Here's an example of individual systems. These are all going to be listed for you and attached in the ESY Google Classroom as well. But this is like a little bit of a token system. This kid, can you go to the next slide, can earn little pirate things. By the way, this is because I love pirates. I could earn a pirate or a ship, right? And then when I earn them all, I get 5 minutes or I get time with you or whatever the case may be. So that's a token board example. Some of you may need to be using point sheet examples. Those are also present. Here's one, and they're also present in the Google Classroom. So some people circle the number, some people write in the number, whatever you're comfortable with, and you can use some of the things that were already part of who you are during the school year if you're new to ESY. The other thought is, remember, many of your kids may come with very specific things outlined within their individual education plan or behavior intervention plans as well.
Yeah, and if they come with something specific, guys, our biggest recommendation is use it because someone spent the time to make it and develop it because they know it's working for that student. So if you come with a point sheet or they come with a token board, make sure it's being put in place because they're going to recognize it and they're going to jump in and be able to utilize it right away.
So no matter what you do, make sure it's attainable, right? Make sure that it's easy to earn in the beginning and that they can earn consistently. That is key. If you're going to do it, you've got to be consistent about it.
Absolutely. So de-escalation, we're going to just do a quick overview of what are some de-escalation strategies that I can use. So remember, we're reminding them of skills that they've already been taught. and we're giving that prompting. So first and foremost, if you see a behavior escalating, you can think about these things, achieve eye contact if possible, using their name and proximity. But guys, know your students, because sometimes getting closer can escalate a situation. Maybe that means I need to take a couple steps back. This is not a time that I'm shouting across the classroom, but instead really being specific, getting on that student's eye level and having that conversation. So an overview of strategies to try in the early stages of pre-crisis, in the middle stages of pre-crisis, and the later stages of pre-crisis. So first we have early stages. We can do things like prompting. Just give them those 1 or 2 word prompts.
Change it up.
Tell them what you want them to do and change it up. If the task is what's making them upset, maybe thinking about changing up the reinforcer or the task. I love at the end it says do it earlier in the chain. That's what Cheryl talked about. If we can catch them here in these early stages, we're going to be less likely to see escalation.
Absolutely. The other thing you can do early in the chain, you can remove distractions. You can make sure you refocus on those goals and reinforcers. So especially if I'm working on a token system, boy, you're so close to earning that next token, right?
Absolutely.
So do it early in the chain. So here's the next stages of crisis. So these are the middle stages, right, of pre-crisis, excuse me. You might need to provide some wait time. So what that means is they might need a little bit more time to process the information that you are providing, especially if it's verbal information. I would suggest at this point that you're pairing your verbals with visuals, depending on the child's level of functioning, but please provide a little bit more time to process. We all process differently. You also need to engage in reflective listening. Let them know that you are listening to them. You are, quote unquote, hearing their side of the story. As we move around, we've talked about this already, but choices, small choices, okay? Small choices, but you still want the initial demand that was placed. So when you give them a choice, it doesn't mean they don't do the work, or it doesn't mean they don't come back to it, okay? And please prompt to use the coping skills that you've taught them. If you're a breathing person and the kid likes breathing, great. If you're a counting person and the kid likes counting, great. If they don't like those, make sure you're prompting some other things that they can do.
All right, and then in those later stages, we're removing demands. At this point, the student is about to escalate into crisis. We're gonna remove demands just for that moment. That doesn't mean they go away forever. We're also decreasing attention, but we're not ignoring. We're monitoring for safety, and we're making sure that we have a plan in place. If possible, and if needed, change out the staff that's monitoring. Maybe I'm calling at that point for my BIA or CIT, Behavior Intervention Associate, or Crisis Intervention Teacher who's on my campus and can help support with behavior. I'm preparing for the crisis and moving my other students. At this point, safety is key.
So don't forget, teamwork makes that dream work, right? Identify those go-to people. You've got today, you've got tomorrow. Make friends at your new ESY site, right? Find out who the teacher next door is. Maybe somebody that you work with during the year. Or make sure, really important, who your administrator is. It's a different person, most likely, than who you're used to working with throughout the year. Make a friend, make connections. The same way you're building relationships with kids, build relationships with adults. Why? Because it's an easy way to set up a system if you were to need help. The student might need to run an errand. Maybe that teacher can come in and take a walk with that student if they're on break and you are not. And then make sure that you know how to gain assistance at your new ESY site if it's needed. Do you use a walkie? Are you gonna buzz the office, or are you gonna use your handy dandy white card? Remember, every school is different. Every school is different, so you have the time now to ask those questions.
Yes, now is the time. Ask those questions in your meetings. You should be meeting with your team in the next day or so. Ask those questions so that you're prepared and you know how to do it. So we are wrapping up. This is just a reminder for curriculum and resources. Everything that you're using forward-facing with your students must be standards-based, must be district-supported, and support through their IEP goal and curriculum. So use what's in the Google Classroom. Everything in the Google Classroom is vetted and for use during ESY. Everything we talked about today will be in that ESY Google Classroom under the social skills and behavior support section. We will post these slides later this afternoon along with the recording of our time today. You also have access to the ESY support form.
Yes.
We ask please, that if these are questions that need to be answered to your site administrator, things about your roster, your schedule, timesheets, payroll, start with your site administrator first. If you have ESE specific questions about how to read this IEP, I have a student with an FBA and BIP, a behavior plan that I need support with, then you can reach out via that form and someone will connect with you. If you have questions, our email addresses are here. You will also see some behavior resource teachers from our team out and about supporting your sites. You're welcome to reach out to them as well. And I'm going to stop our recording.
It has been a pleasure to be with you all today.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, we are here. We'll hang out for just a few minutes.